welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. We bring you the right information to empower you, the SME entrepreneur. Tonight on the show, we are talking about the art of giving an SME perspective, focusing on philanthropy and CSR for small businesses with two experts with us. First up, I want to introduce Shriyans. Bhandari is the founder of Green Soul. We also have Anant Bhagwati. He is partner at Bain and Company. Shriyans, Anant, thanks very much for taking the time to join us here on this panel, really talking about giving and philanthropy and really an in-depth look for SMEs. And it's fantastic to have both of you experts, one an entrepreneur, one a person who's been studying this industry, if I can call it that, of philanthropy very, very closely over many years. Let me start by really talking about all the headlines that we see as far as philanthropy is concerned. Either by design or the fact that it's not being communicated better, it seems like most of the billionaires that we look at who are at the forefront of giving are all from global markets, are primarily from the US. And you have many brilliant examples from there, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, or others. Why is that? Do you think maybe Indians are not giving enough, or are we not talking about it enough? And this is for the two of you.
I think one way where we are lacking is more leaders, more billionaires coming forward and giving. But we do have some examples like Mr. Aziz Premji, Mr. Ratan Tata, who have been, like the entire company philosophy has been into CSR. And on the other side, we have individuals, we have corporates who have been donating a lot, and they've been, the funds have been going to the right place, which is the NGOs and social ventures.
Okay.
And that is where I think a lot of innovation is happening. Earlier, the innovation was happening in companies. Now, a lot of innovation has shifted to the social ventures because of the fund flow to them.
Sure, fair enough. So I will come back to that point, and that's an interesting point. But you know, what Shriyans was really saying, Anant, and I want to pick up on that, and he was saying there is enough happening, but perhaps not as much as what we're seeing on a global scale. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, so I think two or three dimensions, like just to build on Shreya's point. I think one is individual philanthropy has picked up in India very significantly, and you know, I'm sure you've seen the stats in the philanthropy report that we put out for the last 8 years, and so I think there are three things. One is it is picking up. I think mega donors, the concept of not leaving a huge amount of money for your kids, but actually giving to society, has been existent in US for a very long time, and that is critical because you need anchor donors who pick up a cause and who really, you know, move the needle. It's starting to happen around Premji, Tata.
Sure.
But you know, given the fact that India will become potentially, if not the largest, the second largest economy in the next foreseeable 20, 25, 30 years, it's high time that that actually starts happening in India. So I think there is an opportunity here. And absolutely, I think the potential is immense, given the fact that India GDP is booming and is going to grow.
Okay, so my next question is also about, are we not talking about it enough? I do know a lot of people in India are perhaps, you know, undertaking philanthropy, do have philanthropic trusts, but the thought process behind really publicizing that, saying why should we talk about it, that perhaps is not there. Do you think we need more public examples like we're seeing in the US of these big billionaires who are lending, who are then encouraging smaller businesses, entrepreneurs to also perhaps give to philanthropic causes?
Yeah, so let me maybe share. So I think there are two things which need to you know, get more publicized in India.
Yeah.
I think you're bang on. One is you know, as people give, the reason it's critical for that to be publicized is role models need to get established.
Yeah.
And you know, it's also important because role models need to be closer home. So a diamond merchant, a leading diamond merchant giving freely and giving in a way that has never been given before is likely to inspire a whole bunch of diamond industry SMEs much more impactfully than, let's say, you know, IT sector donors. So that's important. I think the second part which needs to be publicized much more is how the money is used and how the impact is driven. Because a large part of why money needs to come in faster is people have to believe that giving at scale is important. Because in India, the issue is the donations are fragmented.
Sure.
So the belief sometimes is if I have 100 rupees, let me break it up into 10 non-profits and give 10 each. The reality is the money goes much further if you scale. And that's the big difference between what you see in US, for example, and what needs to evolve in India over the next few years.
Sure, fair enough.
I think he made a very good point when he said that we need to publicize more how money is utilized. Because I think if there are more good enterprises who are very transparent in what they're doing, I think there'll be more companies who will be ready to fund. And there should be also a model where one is you give one-time donation, second is sustainable, you are actually solving that problem.
Sure.
So I think more NGOs are required to move in that direction, which is sustainably solving one issue at a time. So we'll have more funding coming to different sectors.
Okay, I have one more question based on what the two of you have just said. Both of you have named, Azim Premji, the Tatas, the Tata Trust, the Tata Foundation, etc. Is a lot of the philanthropic effort in India still concentrated on old money? Do you see a lot of younger entrepreneurs, a lot of newer money that's coming in perhaps, where entrepreneurs are recognizing the need to give back?
I think if you, like Flipkart, if you take Flipkart's example, he's investing into startups again.
Okay,
so I think
and you see that as a kind of philanthropy in some sense?
Yes, that's a way of giving back because you're putting the money back again and it's coming back into the cycle with more startups getting access to better platforms.
Okay, and that's something that your report also talks about, that in the US, for instance, a lot of people who are doing philanthropy are tending to invest into businesses where they see returns coming back in some sense.
Sure. So, I think two parts, the way and you're a great example of that. I think the next generation of givers, whether it's old economy or startups, is going to behave in a very different way compared to the older generation. Because the next generation is going to think long-term, think impact, think scale. I think that's the big change because as you start thinking of that, the ability to give to actually what I'd call as institution building, rather than just giving to the specific cause itself is very critical. And that mindset shift is important. So what I'm trying to say is building the institution which can drive social impact as opposed to directly giving the money to the last guy. That earlier approach is the way by which you scale.
Can you give us an example of that?
So let's say if you were to look at Akshay Patra, right? Okay. I could go and feed 10 people in a temple or 20 or 30. But look, they have the capacity now to cook rice, cook sambar, cook rotis at unprecedented scale in an unprecedented number of cities with quality, almost maintaining a quality level which is unheard of. Now that will not happen if there were 25 Akshay Patras. That will happen if there is one or two, which is going up the learning curve and then scaling massively. And that needs to happen in all sectors, and the next gen gets it because startups is all about that, right?
Sure.
I also have an interesting point that from what I think, businesses and social, the difference should merge over time. There should be no business who's not doing social. So when you're doing something, that social angle is so important that it's as important as your bottom line. So you take care of both, and the
interesting point.
Is actually not there.
Okay, I'm just going to come back and pick up on that. You were talking about, CSR, so I will just come back to that. But before that, my question to you, Anant, is you've been very closely involved with the philanthropy report. You've been spearheading that for the past 8 years. And you've said that every year the findings have been very different from the year prior. Just walk us through very quickly for our viewers, maybe some of the key takeaways for this year's report versus the previous years.
Sure. And it's been a fascinating journey along with Dasra, studying the sector for 8 years. So I'd say in the initial 4 or 5 years, the issue had been more of the money coming into the system. Almost what I'd call as a supply side constraint.
Sure.
And the reason is either the money only goes into religious causes or causes which are like, let me do something in my village. So, very local causes. I think that issue is reducing dramatically. That means more money is coming in.
Sure.
That's also a function of India making more money.
Okay.
I think now the challenge is demand side, which is, are there enough non-profits which can absorb that capital very efficiently, transparently, and actually impact the cause? And just an example, right, with a country like ours, where there are 300 million people who need to get above a certain threshold of income, there are not too many scale NGOs which are serving more than even 2 million people per year. Maybe the number is less than 10. So the big challenge now is how can there be 100 of these which are doing things efficiently, transparently, at scale, so that the money which is coming in can be utilized. And this is important because unless the money is utilized efficiently, more new money won't come in. So it's a very similar to an investing cycle.
Okay, you were saying that now supply of money isn't a challenge. The Charities Aid Foundation put out a report in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, saying 84% of all individuals in India are now reporting that they're actually giving to philanthropic causes, no matter what the amounts are. Are you seeing more of that? Are you seeing individuals now, not necessarily, you know, your Tatas, Birlas, etc., who are giving money?
Yeah, it's happening so absolutely. So 3 buckets, right? So there's retail. So retail has picked up, also assisted by marathons, a lot of the events which... The second is what I'd call as the corporates, so which is the CSR bucket. And the third is UHNIs, HNIs, etc. I think all of them are picking up, but you know, in a way it's good because the causes are massive. What's I think critical is there have to be a few who come in at a mega scale. Because when you want to make a dramatic difference to a field, let's say mental health, you need an anchor to come in. Then a lot of people will join that. But then the question comes, who's going to absorb that capital in a way that it's super efficient?
Sure.
So I think it's moving in the right direction, but needs to move much faster.
Okay. Shriyans, you're in a very interesting space. I just want you to talk to our viewers about, you know, Green Soul, about where the germ of the idea really came about, and the fact that you're doing good, but you are a for-profit organization, and how you really work with others in this ecosystem.
So Green Soul is a 4-year-old startup. We recycle. Our idea is very simple. We take old shoes which would have gone in landfills. We take it back from there, we make it into slippers, and then we give it to children in need.
Sure.
And we also have skill centers where they can recycle it, where people can get employment. So in the long term, we are solving this problem.
I want you to talk to our viewers who might perhaps be wondering, you know, they want to be involved in, you know, working closely with the marginalized and the poorest sections of society, but at the same time are wondering, can they make money? And yours is a great example of saying, yes, you can make money. What have been your own learnings? For someone watching this interview, maybe 1 or 2 key takeaways in terms of how they can bridge that gap, set up a business that's making money.
It should have 2 sides. It should, if someone doesn't have money, it should be given to him or her at a lesser cost. If someone can afford it, it can be given the same thing at a higher cost and better version of it.
Sure.
So they both link to the cause, and this is like 1 for 1, where you take money from those who have and give to those who are solving the same problem. So one is have a product, then have a clear business model where you have a donation side and a business side of things, and you don't mix both of them. And the third takeaway will be having an innovative idea. I think every day there's so many problems and people come with a lot of solutions also. But sitting down, making a product and then scaling it, I think at least if you take a couple of steps, there are a lot of resources available these days. The government is taking so many initiatives. From all sides, there are a lot of initiatives. And,
we're going to take a very quick break on that note, but we will continue talking about the art of giving, philanthropy and CSR, and what it really means for the 2nd and 3rd generation of business families and companies. Do stay tuned. Back after a short break. Welcome back. With us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight on the show we're continuing our focus on the art of giving for small businesses. Do take a listen to this panel discussion that I did earlier. Let's talk about CSR. For our viewers who are watching this interview, and there was interesting research done by Prime Database which said that the government, because of this 2% which is being looked at in terms of a mandate for businesses to spend into CSR, a lot of people, if you're looking at the numbers may look good in terms of how corporate India is really putting money into CSR and into philanthropic causes. It maybe 2017 actually has the funds of 2016 which has gone in because you're being forced to file. Do you think perhaps that there has to be a rethink of how corporate India is being encouraged to sort of give by the government?
I think it's a very socialist move to have 2% mandatory, but...
do you think it's serving the purpose?
not all the funds are going in the right direction. It may be funding government's own projects also, but a lot of funding is going for good causes. So it's a good step overall, I would think.
Okay.
And
would you agree?
No, I agree. It's a needed step.
Okay.
I guess again, if I go back to the principle of scale and a repeatable model which works, I think in addition to just the 2%, I think how the 2% is used.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to saying, okay, spend X amount of money in provisioning some facilities for your employees.
Sure.
But there has to be some quality control on what facilities these are. And I almost feel it's important by sector maybe to determine what are those things where you invest this, because 2% is a lot of money. And right now, obviously it's a movement, but there will come a time when it will be adhered to. When that adhered to, it's a huge corpus. So how this corpus is multiplied is very critical. And that's something which needs to be figured out and almost institutionalized, so that there are best practices of how you use this money of CSR to further the social impact.
Okay, so we've spoken about effectiveness and how you are ensuring that the money which is meant for different causes is being used effectively. And you did mention earlier about how NGOs perhaps need to scale. You were also talking about how there are fewer than 10 such organizations perhaps in the country. How can that be fixed? That's the big question. How can that that middle layer really be fixed to ensure effectiveness then?
So from where I come, I think a lot of young individuals would hesitate to start a social venture at such a young age or at the beginning of their career. So I think we need more encouragement in the youth to start these companies, which are social driven as well as profitable. And I think once they start innovating, they start stepping into this, because they have the maximum energy, maximum risk taking ability at this age. So more such people should step in, and everyone should encourage that.
But how about the legacy that already exists in terms of the NGOs and the organizations that already exist? What is the kind of rehaul, in your opinion, that needs to ensure effectiveness of the funds and the supply which is coming in?
Sure. And just building on, so I work a lot in the for-profit as well.
Yeah.
And if I look at how the for-profit scale, right? So three big things, right? One is you need the leadership talent. You need talent, energy and talent. So that is one. Yeah. Good people. I think the second thing is there has to be an innovative, repeatable idea at the very center of the organization. Like you said, right? You have a very simple yet repeatable idea. So today there are enormous number of NGOs in India. It's almost like too many. But the issue is it's all either a me too, or in some cases the repeatable model is not sharp. So I think that's the second important thing. And the third thing, once that's done, is the support organization. So how do you run funding? How do you run scaling? How do you operate? The very basic things which we do in for-profit, which are almost like taken for granted, don't exist in the non-profit.
Sure.
Because the belief is all of that is a wasteful expenditure and should not be funded. So the reality is the right leader, the right repeatable model at the center, and then funding the right enablers so that this actually can be scaled are important. And what that will mean is, instead of lakhs of NGOs, we maybe need 10,000 extremely high potential NGOs, and of them there will be 100 or 200 which will scale to supersize.
So you have to run social ventures like businesses, but have a very transparent know-how also.
Okay, you said something about talent. I just want to pick up on that, Ananta. When we did our philanthropy panel last year, one of the key takeaways was that we need people, like you were saying. We need people who are coming in, who have that accountability, want to have that accountability, even in this sector, but are perhaps being paid competitive salaries, because that's what's really going to encourage more people to come in. Is that happening? Do you see more and more, like you're saying, it's difficult at a young age to encourage more people to come in, but if you're offering the other incentives, if you're offering perhaps work like in the corporate sector, you can have more people like that.
So I think from what I think is that if there's a business side, then they'll have sufficient funds to give sufficient salaries, and somewhere it's required the efficiency and everything in social sector also, where, like for giving our example, we make very high content videos which appear as good as a corporate video, and they gave us the reach. So I think those smaller things are required in social organizations, but if they have the for-profit side, then they'll be able to fund this, and then it's a cycle. Then people will come, younger people will come, they'll see them as role models and things like that.
I'll ask a couple of questions, and I want to talk about innovation when it comes to philanthropy and giving really in India. You have some fantastic examples. You have Dasra, like you were saying. We do have also the Azim Premji University, where they're working with Train the Trainers. You have Vineet Nair and his Sampark Foundation, for instance. All of that has come about because of innovating, saying, yes, money is going into education, for instance, but how do you innovate further in that space? Are we seeing enough of that? How perhaps can an SME or an entrepreneur who's looking at this space then, what sort of lessons, what takeaways, how can they innovate in this space?
I think there's further scope of innovation when it comes to social ventures. I think because it's not profitable. I was sitting in a conference, and a social venture conference, and in that room everyone, the average age was 50 years. So it's a very sad situation where more younger people need to jump into this and make for-profit social ventures. And innovation, there's a lot of scope, because very hard, like we see a lot of innovation in for-profit businesses, very scalable ventures. But when it comes to social ventures, these problems are so big, they can be tackled in innovative ways. But in very few cases I've been seeing that. In medical space there have been, where they can take medical tests at very low cost, they have mobile health. But still sufficient scope is there, I think, because every problem, it can be solved innovatively at a very less cost and much more efficiently.
Okay. How are you ensuring money is going into more sectors in India? I know you're constantly talking about scale, and for scale you need to focus on specific areas in India. But my question is that, yes, we are largely talking about education and healthcare in India, but how about the other sectors? How are you ensuring that money is also going into those sectors?
Well, so this is also a bit of a conundrum which we found as we looked at it, which is money tends to go to sectors where you have direct visibility of outcome. So you'll see a lot of money going to midday meals, but complicated sectors where there's a delayed gratification. So in fact, education is one of those where vocation education, to bridge the gap between school and job, is critical. Like otherwise we'll have a huge number of people coming into the work stream but not skilled to get the right job, because the job profiles are changing. So now, if you need money to come into this, you need a playbook, which is not just an NGO playbook, but is a playbook of how do you work with the government, how do you work with schools, how do you work with companies to get these jobs actually clearly notarized. So essentially my interesting simple answer is, solve the problem. Don't think of scaling a NGO, or don't think of scaling a foundation, but work backwards from saying, what is the problem I'm solving? Your problem was, look, there are a lot of kids going to schools but don't have shoes, and it hurts them. And then you worked backwards from there and found the right ecosystem to solve it. And that approach needs to be taken sector by sector or subsector, and that will lead more money going into sectors where it's not directly visible how do you impact the problem. Or you make an investment now and you see the results 10 years from now.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, that's our show tonight. We'd love hearing from you about what you, as an SME entrepreneur, are perhaps doing in the area of philanthropy. Here's how you let us know. leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com is our email ID. Get in touch with us on our social media pages as well. Tweet at me personally at Sanand_J or LOT_ET now, or reach us on our Facebook page, Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.